So we all heard the most, I think, inspiring cultural practitioners today. This is a summit that celebrates it. But I want to speak about another potential that exists within the art and cultural domain. And that is our ability as cultural practitioners, as artists, as architects, as filmmakers, working together with lawyers and perhaps scientists, to also expose the most grievous of human rights, to stand against the abuse of power by states and corporations. And perhaps as architects, as an artist, we have something unique to show, working as journalists and forensic investigators in this context. This is a group, this is a small part of my group, those that are based in London. Forensic Architecture is a research agency with offices in Berlin, London, Bogota, Mexico City, and very importantly in Ramallah, together with the human rights organization Al-Haq, working to expose abuses of state violence and human rights investigations that we undertake continuously. You would ask, what is architecture got to do with politics and human rights? I have myself started with an analysis exposing violations of human rights undertaken by Israeli architects in the occupied Palestinian territories by building settlements that control and survey Palestinians. These are hilltop settlements designed by architects almost as strategic tools in what I call the civilian occupation. And here in blue, the area under the settlement's control enter, fragment, and control Palestinian areas in the occupied territories. You see how architecture and planning can actually not only serve people, not only show the best of humanity, but also be an exercise of violence. So forensic architecture is a way of reading architectural facts, architectural material, architectural situations, in order to see within them evidence for these violations that I'm speaking about. Perhaps the best way to understand it is just like a pathologist reads a dead body here, looking at the bones. Forensic architecture look for evidence of these crimes in walls, in foundations, in buildings, in plans, in bridges, in roads, etc., in a way that they are conceived, sometimes in order to survey and control us. And what is incredibly important, or what makes this practice important, is the fact that most conflict takes place these days within cities. And in fact, when civilians die in war, they mainly die inside buildings. And a majority of the people that die inside buildings die within their own home. Violence invades the most precious of public spaces, as we can see here in a photograph after an Israeli bombing in Gaza. So effectively, forensic architecture is like a practice that resembles archaeology, the archaeology of the present or the very near past, in which we're looking at traces of destruction in order to understand what has taken place. Like in this particular building, we're looking at every bit of shrapnel from a bomb that here, in this case, was dropped by the CIA on Miran Shah in Pakistan. And looking at those shrapnels very carefully, we can see this area where there are least shrapnels and understand that these are the places where people here, in the red outline, where people died, where people stood. So looking at walls is almost like looking at photographs. Those bodies have been exposed to violence like a negative is exposed to light. Building models sometimes help us understand and reconstruct what have taken place. And being architects and also artists, we are participating in many exhibitions worldwide. This is a photograph from the Venice Biennale when we had the opportunity to build in one-to-one a model of that room in Pakistan, where we exposed in a work that was commissioned by the UN and was presented at the UN General Assembly, that particular strike, reconstruct the weapon that was used, and could analyze exactly. And you see again those outline photographed, etched onto the building in this way. But the source material that we have today, the way in which we understand conflict, all the way from Ukraine through Syria to Gaza, is through images and photographs. Many of those that appear online, and those need to be analyzed. And in order to analyze them, we need to, again, make use of another form of architectural model. We call our models operative models, because they are not models of buildings yet to be built, but they are modes of analysis and modes of presentation in forensic files. And here in a hospital in Syria, we reconstruct what has happened by comparing architectural models with multiple photographs and sometimes even physical models, as in this case in Bogota of enforced disappearance by the military in 1984. We even analyze cases that are 40 years old. Another use of models, of our operative models, is working on police murder. Here, the racialized killing of the Chicago Police Department of a man in the south side of Chicago. There's been 8 body-worn cameras, each one showing an aspect of the event, but the model itself allows us to synthesize 8 different perspectives into an informationally enriched model that allows us to understand the detail of the incident and to show that that man, Harith Augustus, before being shot, was actually trying to show his license to the police, and was here, as you can see, shot by the police forces. And that is material that goes into court and into newspapers in order to expose this form of violence. Here in Jenin, in the West Bank, we were working with Al-Haq together in exposing the exact place from which the Israeli army shot celebrated Al Jazeera journalist Shirin Abu Akleh, and the munition that was used to do that, showing the whole world, and indeed standing with a family together and bringing those evidence file to the International Criminal Court in The Hague, standing here with the brother Anton Abu Akleh, both in the ICC and the Congress, in presenting that evidence in the most important, perhaps effective forums in which accountability could be thought. So here we are also using models as one-to-one arenas for reconstruction, not only digital reconstruction, but physical ones. Here in a case of a neo-Nazi killing in Germany of 9 members of migrants communities. We're building those models almost as sets in which we reconstruct every aspect of that killing. Another way in which we use models, those operative models that I referred to before, are as gateways to recollection, working together with witnesses that are often very traumatized or too traumatized to remember exactly what happened. Architecture allows them ways of recollection, building together models, sitting in front of the computer. Here in the case of the Grenfell Tower fire, a fire that happened in London, we are working with 800 survivors of that fire to reconstruct what have happened to them, and we're sitting in front of computer screens, allowing them to recall through a kind of an immersive experience of walking through and recalling what has taken place. So again, our work is presented in courts, but it's also presented in exhibitions, because we believe in a function and in the potential of art and culture to allow places for accountability, to allow places where information, precise information about the most important aspects and the most important violations of human rights to be exposed, working together with the bereaved families. Here, a father of one of the victims in Germany of this horrible terror attack, and creating in exhibitions areas of political intensity, almost like a gathering, a social gathering around the facts and around demands for political change. We show our work not only in courts, but in truth commissions and in citizen tribunals such as this one. And of course, the people that go to our exhibitions include both the art goers, the general public, but also police officers and politicians go and from those exhibitions would invite our work back into court. So whereas sometimes the art press would say about our work when it's presented in exhibitions, this is not an artwork, it's evidence. When we present it in court, they would say, this is not evidence, this is art. And indeed, we enjoy very much the ambiguity and slippage between these domains. We feel this is not a problem, this is our power of effectively combining those works together. But art spaces are not innocent spaces themselves. When we were invited to show our work at the Whitney Biennale, we realized that the vice chair of the Whitney board was a trader in weapons and ammunition, including in tear gas, and we devised ways to train machine learning algorithms, part of AI, to identify the munition that he sells, to expose where he sells that munition worldwide. Imagine you're invited into an exhibition and you expose the crimes of those that invite you, and led, in fact, our exposure across the internet. We sent those algorithms to fetch all incidents and knew all the places and cities where his material was used, led, in fact, to his resignation and to his disinvestment from tear gas. So I think that this is a small example of how agency and accountability could be exercised through creative process, through collaboration between artists, architects, lawyers, and journalists, and how we can go across those disciplines in order to find a new way to exercise our art. Thank you very much.